The words hit me like a physical blow, a vicious whisper in the celebratory air. "I wish you'd just disappear," she'd hissed, her eyes cold, devoid of the warmth I'd nurtured for decades. "It would be best if you died." The aroma of the ube cake I'd baked, a labor of love for her 43rd birthday, suddenly felt cloying, sickening. My heart, a vessel overflowing with a mother's devotion, fractured into 1,000 icy shards. How could the child I carried, the daughter I adored, utter such cruelty, especially on a day meant for joy? Was this the harvest of a lifetime of planting love, a lifetime of watering dreams? Could a mother's boundless sacrifice truly lead to such an empty, bitter fruit? I stood there, a 70-year-old woman with trembling hands, the gift wrapped in glittering paper, feeling heavy as lead. My daughter, Ilara, turned away, dismissing me with a flick of her wrist, her attention already on her husband, Marcus, and the group of friends laughing by the poolside. They didn't even glance my way, as if I were a ghost, an unwelcome specter haunting their lavish celebration. I had arrived early, as always, to help with the preparations, to ensure everything was perfect for her special day. I had brought the cake, a basket of her favorite exotic fruits, and a hand-knitted shawl, meticulously crafted stitch by painful stitch, for the cool evenings. My presence, it seemed, was the only imperfection. That night, lying in the quiet solitude of my small, rented room, the words echoed, a relentless hammer against the fragile walls of my heart. "Best if you died." It wasn't just a passing fit of anger, it was a venomous pronouncement, a deep-seated resentment that had festered silently. My mind, usually a jumble of daily tasks and worries for my children, began an involuntary, horrifying audit of my life. 43 years. 43 years since I first held her, a tiny bundle of hope and pure love. And what had those years truly cost me? The images flooded my consciousness, a cinematic reel of sacrifices, each one a pang of recognition, a fresh wave of grief. The small house, the one I had scrimped and saved for, making the initial down payment with my late husband's meager life insurance and every centavo I could earn from sewing clothes. It was meant to be our family home, a sanctuary. But when Ilara and Marcus decided they needed a bigger place, a more impressive address, I readily agreed to be their guarantor. The payments, initially, were theirs. But life, as it often does, threw its curveballs. Marcus's business ventures, always grand in vision but volatile in execution, often faltered. And I, the ever-reliable safety net, was always there to catch them. House payments, I tallied them in my head, a dizzying sum. Not just for their first home, but for their second, grander one too, the one that was now the backdrop for her callous birthday party. I had covered months, sometimes a full year, of mortgage payments when Marcus's investments soured. I remembered selling my mother's heirloom jewelry, a delicate string of pearls, to cover one particularly large installment when the bank threatened foreclosure. That alone was almost 1,000,000 pesos. Gone. Then there were the school fees. Not just for Ilara, but for her 2 children, my grandchildren. Private schools, of course, the best money could buy, because Ilara believed quality. Education was non-negotiable. I agreed. I worked extra shifts at the textile factory, my fingers aching, my eyes strained, to ensure their tuition was always paid on time. From kindergarten to college for Ilara, then through primary school and into high school for my grandchildren. Maya and Leo. The tuition fees, the books, the uniforms, the extracurricular activities, the field trips abroad. I remembered how proud Ilara was when Maya got into a prestigious art program overseas, a program I fully funded, draining my retirement savings for her dreams. Another 2,000,000 pesos, perhaps more, slowly chipped away from my future. Her wedding, a grand affair, as Ilara insisted, a once-in-a-lifetime event, Mama, she'd pleaded, her eyes wide with expectation. I had mortgaged my own small apartment, the one I inherited from my parents, to provide the extravagant banquet, the designer gown, the elaborate floral arrangements, the dream wedding she always wanted, captured in glossy photographs, while I fretted about the interest payments on the loan, almost another 1,000,000 pesos, sacrificed at the altar of her happiness. And their business ventures. Oh, the business ventures. Marcus, ever the entrepreneur, always had a new scheme. A restaurant that failed within a year, a boutique that never turned a profit, a tech startup that fizzled out before launch. Each time, I was the investor of last resort, the silent partner who never saw a return. My hard-earned money, my meager savings, poured into their bottomless pit of ambition and poor judgment. I remembered signing guarantees, lending sums I couldn't afford to lose, always believing in them, always hoping for their success, hoping it would ease their burden, and by extension, mine. I didn't have a precise figure for this, but the memory of specific amounts, a few 100,000 here, 500,000 there, added up to another substantial chunk of my life's earnings. Then there was the constant, unspoken expectation of my presence. The grandchildren, Maya and Leo. I adored them, truly. But I was not just a grandmother. I was their primary caregiver for years. While Alara and Marcus pursued their careers and social lives, I was the one who picked them up from school, cooked their meals, helped with homework, nursed them through fevers, and listened to their childish woes. My own life, my friendships, my hobbies, faded into the background. I was available, always, a standby service for my family. The emotional cost of this was immeasurable, the financial savings for them, substantial. They never had to pay for nannies, never worried about childcare. This was a silent, daily sacrifice, a constant giving of my time and energy, often without a word of thanks. As the sun began to paint the sky with streaks of orange and purple, I sat up, my body stiff, my mind unnervingly clear. Nearly 5,000,000 pesos. 5,000,000 pesos, equivalent to a lifetime of labor, of deferred dreams, of silent suffering. And for what? A lifetime of giving, rewarded with a wish for my death. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave, washing away decades of ingrained loyalty and obligation. I was not a mother to Alara anymore. I was a financial instrument, a resource to be exploited, then discarded when inconvenient. Something broke inside me that night, something irreparable. But from the rubble, a new, fierce resolve began to stir. I would not die. Not yet. I would live. And I would live for myself. The next morning, the tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by a steely determination. My first call was to my bank. I explained my situation, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. I instructed them to immediately block all future transfers to Alara's accounts. Then, I requested a detailed statement of all joint accounts and any accounts where I was listed as a co-signer or guarantor. The numbers, when they arrived, confirmed my grim tally, even exceeding it in some areas. My second call was to my lawyer, Mr. Ramirez, a kind, elderly gentleman who had handled my late husband's estate. He listened patiently as I recounted the previous night's events and the long history of my financial involvement. His face, usually placid, creased with concern. "Mrs. Reyes," he said gently, "your generosity has been immense. But it appears it has been taken for granted, to your detriment." He confirmed that as the guarantor for their house, I had certain rights, especially given my history of covering payments. We began the process of formally informing the bank of my intention to revoke my guarantee if my principal was not secured, and to explore all legal avenues to protect my remaining assets. I also had him draft a formal letter to Alara and Marcus, stating that all financial support was immediately terminated. effective immediately. Next, I changed my phone number and blocked all their previous contact information. The silence that followed was initially deafening. Then, gradually, it began to feel like a balm. The constant stream of requests, the subtle manipulations, the thinly veiled accusations of not doing enough, all ceased. It was as if I had cut 1,000 invisible threads that had tethered me to a life of endless servitude. The decision to leave the country came to me during one of my long, solitary walks by the bay. The familiar sights and sounds of Manila, once comforting, now felt suffocating. Every street corner held a memory of a sacrifice. Every family gathering, a reminder of their ingratitude. I needed a complete break, a new beginning, a place where I could be just me, not Alara's mother, not Maya and Leo's grandmother, not a bottomless well of financial support. Europe beckoned, a distant dream from my youth, a continent of history and art I had always longed to explore, but never had the time or money. I liquidated all my remaining assets, sold the small apartment I still owned, the one I had almost lost to Alara's wedding loan, and received a decent sum. With Mr. Ramirez's help, I ensured all legal documents were in order. I applied for a long-stay visa, studied basic French phrases from a worn textbook, and booked a one-way ticket to Paris. It was terrifying, exhilarating. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and liberation. The day I boarded that plane, I carried only 2 suitcases and a new sense of purpose. I looked back at the sprawling city, a place that had been my home for 70 years, and felt no regret, only a profound sense of peace. I was a woman reborn, shedding the skin of a perpetually sacrificing mother. My new life began the moment the wheels lifted off the tarmac. Paris was everything I had imagined, and more. The language was a challenge, a joyous struggle that stimulated parts of my brain I hadn't used in decades. I enrolled in an intensive French language school, sitting alongside students, young enough to be my grandchildren, their laughter infectious, their energy revitalizing. I rented a small, charming apartment in a quiet arrondissement, with a balcony overlooking a bustling street, a constant source of fascination. For the first time, in what felt like forever, I was learning for myself, not for someone else's future, not to help someone else achieve their dreams. I made friends, other expats and kind-hearted Parisians, who saw me as an individual, not defined by my past or my family obligations. We explored museums, sipped coffee in quaint cafes, and shared stories in halting French and broken English. I started painting again, a hobby I had abandoned in my 20s when life's responsibilities became too heavy. The strokes of the brush on canvas, the vibrant colors, brought a forgotten joy back into my life. My health, often neglected during my years of relentless toil, improved dramatically. I walked everywhere, ate fresh, wholesome food, and slept soundly for the first time in years, unburdened by worry. Meanwhile, back home, the consequences of my departure began to unfold. A few months after I left, Elara and Marcus faced a harsh reality check. Without my constant financial injections, their meticulously constructed house of cards began to crumble. The bank, no longer receiving payments from me, began formal foreclosure proceedings on their grand house. The mortgage payments they had intermittently failed to make had accumulated, and without a guarantor willing to step in, their home was at severe risk. The calls started. First, hesitant, then increasingly desperate. My new, unlisted number remained silent. They tried reaching me through old friends, distant relatives. My message to those intermediaries was firm but polite. I am well, I am safe, and I am not available. They eventually found my lawyer, Mr. Ramirez, who calmly reiterated that I was no longer financially supporting them and that any communication regarding their financial difficulties should be directed to him. The climax of their desperation came when Marcus called Mr. Ramirez, pleading, his voice laced with a newfound humility that was completely uncharacteristic. "Please, just tell Mama to come back. We need her. The bank is going to take everything." Mr. Ramirez relayed the message, but my resolve remained unshaken. This was not about love. It was about money. They only needed Mama, the ATM, not Mama, the person. Then came the truly shocking move. A few weeks later, I received official documents through Mr. Ramirez. Elara had filed a petition with the court, alleging that I was suffering from severe cognitive decline, that I was no longer of sound mind, and that she should be appointed as my legal guardian. The audacity, the sheer perfidy of it, took my breath away. She wanted to declare me incompetent, to gain control over my assets, to force my return. The wound she inflicted on her birthday, which had barely begun to scar over, ripped open anew. But this time, I was not broken. I was incensed. This was not just a betrayal. It was an assault on my very identity, my intelligence, my autonomy. I immediately contacted Mr. Ramirez. "We will fight this. Mr. Ramirez," I told him, my voice colder than I knew it could be. With every fiber of my being, the legal process was draining, even from a distance. It required a medical legal assessment, which I willingly underwent in Paris. A team of neurologists and psychiatrists, thoroughly independent, conducted extensive cognitive tests, interviews, and psychological evaluations. It was a rigorous process, probing my memory, my reasoning, my emotional state. But I approached it with a quiet confidence. My mind, far from deteriorating, had been sharpened by my new life, by the challenge of learning a new language and navigating a new culture. The results, when they arrived a few weeks later, were a resounding vindication. The medical legal assessment unequivocally confirmed that I was not only of sound mind, but remarkably alert, articulate, and entirely capable of managing my own affairs. My memory was sharp, my judgment clear, my emotional state stable. The report praised my resilience and adaptability. Elara's accusations were baseless, her petition a desperate, malicious fabrication. The court dismissed her case, finding no grounds for intervention. It was a victory, not just legally, but emotionally. It solidified my belief that I was on the right path, that my decision to choose myself was not only justified, but necessary for my survival. With Elara's desperate attempts thwarted, the bank proceeded with the foreclosure. The house, the symbol of their perceived success and my financial burden, was eventually put up for auction. As the guarantor, I was entitled to recover my principal and any interest I had paid on their behalf. Mr. Ramirez diligently worked with the bank's legal team, meticulously accounting for every peso I had contributed over the years. When the dust settled, the sale of their house allowed the bank to recover their loan, and I, to my astonishment, and recovered a significant portion of my initial capital, plus a fair amount of interest on the monies I had paid over the years. It wasn't the full 5 million pesos, as some of my direct cash infusions were harder to trace without formal loan agreements, but it was a substantial amount, far more than I had dared to hope for. Combined with the sale of my old apartment in Manila and my prudent investments in Europe, my net worth had not only stabilized, but had begun to grow. I was financially secure, truly independent, for the first time in my life. My life in Paris continued to flourish. My French improved dramatically, allowing me to engage more deeply with the culture and community. I became a regular at local art galleries, joined a book club, and even started a small gardening patch on my balcony, tending to herbs and flowers with a care I rarely had time for before. My story, however, did not remain confined to my personal circle. My language school instructor, a lovely woman named Madame Dubois, encouraged me to write about my experiences. Initially, I hesitated, reluctant to air my family's private pain. But Madame Dubois convinced me that my story could be a source of strength for others. Your journey, Madame Reyes, she said, is one of remarkable courage and self-discovery. Many women, especially older women, find themselves trapped in similar situations of emotional and financial abuse. Your voice could be a beacon. And so, I began to write. Late into the nights, the words flowed from me, a torrent of suppressed emotions, memories, and insights. I wrote about the suffocating nature of unconditional love when it is exploited, the insidious creep of financial manipulation, and the immense courage it takes to reclaim one's autonomy. I wrote about the quiet shame, the guilt, and the eventual liberation. I shared my journey of leaving everything behind, learning a new language, building a new life. My articles were initially published in a local Parisian expat magazine, then picked up by a women's online journal. I was invited for interviews, my story resonating with countless women across different cultures. The feedback was overwhelming. Women wrote to me, sharing their own stories of silent sacrifice, of being drained by their families, of feeling invisible and unappreciated. My story became a testament to the fact that it's never too late to choose yourself, to set boundaries, to demand respect. Eventually, a publishing house approached me. They wanted me to turn my articles into a book, a guide for older women seeking to escape emotional and financial abuse. The process was demanding, requiring me to revisit painful memories, but it was also incredibly therapeutic. The book, titled The Unburdened Heart, A Woman's Guide to Reclaiming Her Life in Later Years, became a modest success, empowering many women to recognize the signs of exploitation and find the courage to break free. Years passed. My life in Europe was rich and fulfilling. I continued to learn, to travel, to invest wisely, growing my resources further. I found a deep sense of peace, a contentment that had eluded me for most of my life. The wounds of the past had healed, leaving only faint scars, reminders of a battle won. One day, I received a letter. It bore a familiar postmark, Manila. My hands, which had once trembled at the thought of Ilara, now opened it with a quiet curiosity. It was from her. The handwriting was neat, formal. She wrote of their difficulties after losing the house, of Marcus's continued struggles, of her own reflections. She spoke of regret, of understanding the gravity of her words that night, of realizing the depth of my sacrifices. She apologized, truly apologized, for the first time. She didn't ask for money, only for forgiveness, for a chance to reconnect. I read the letter several times, each word sinking in. The apology felt genuine, perhaps born from the crucible of her own suffering. A part of me, the old, unconditionally loving mother, yearned to reach out, to mend the broken ties. But the new me, the woman who had fought tooth and nail for her peace and dignity, knew better. I did not respond to the letter, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. The peace I had painstakingly built, the serenity I now enjoyed, was too precious to risk. I had learned a vital lesson: maternal love does not, and should not, equate to self-destruction. Setting boundaries, demanding respect, and reclaiming one's autonomy can be the most profound act of rebirth, even in the twilight years of life. My grandchildren, Maya and Leo, eventually reached out to me independently. They were grown now, in their mid-20s, pursuing their own paths. They expressed their love and admiration for my courage, their voices filled with genuine affection. They understood, with a maturity I hadn't seen in their mother, the unfairness of the past. We began a cautious, loving correspondence, a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine care, free from the old patterns of exploitation. We met in neutral territory, in a charming small town in Italy, enjoying each other's company without the shadow of past grievances or financial expectations. My heart, long unburdened, found joy in these new, healthy connections. I never returned to the life I left behind. My days were filled with purpose, with quiet joys, with the freedom to be truly myself. The story of my life, once a tragedy of endless giving, had transformed into a testament of resilience, a lesson in boundaries, consequences, and the inviolable dignity of a woman who finally chose herself. And for that, I was eternally grateful.